Black like me. Black like me. Black like me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Hey, good people. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. So let me ask you, are we having fun during season 8 or what? Just a little background, just to recap. I've just experienced a milestone of leadership, just celebrated the 35th anniversary of my senior pastorate at Fountain of Life Church. Just celebrated my 30th anniversary as the CEO and founder of the Nehemiah Center for Urban Leadership Development. And I just decided that I wanted to talk a little bit about my leadership strategies, successes, failures, thoughts, ideas, things I would do differently. But rather than just sitting here with the mic and just spout off about what I learned, I thought that I would invite some of my friends who have interacted with me, who have served in key areas of leadership, to ask me questions from their perspective, from their vantage point, that they would like to have me address. And so they get to shape their own questions. I don't tell them what to say. I direct it a little bit, but they get a chance to do that. So I'm going to jump right into it because I have a very special guest today. I have Mr. Rick Phelps. Now I'm going to talk about what Rick has done lately. But when I first became aware of Mr. Phelps, he was the county executive for Dane County, Wisconsin. So when Nehemiah was created about 30 years ago, he was the county executive. And so much like the way the mayor oversees the services and programs of city government and the services within the city, county executive oversees those services for the entire county. And so in our situation, that's sheriff, that's mental health, that's social services. And so he had a broad portfolio of responsibilities. And some of the legislation that he supported benefited Nehemiah and his efforts tremendously. But we've reconnected over the past several years because of my Justified Anger essay and work that I'm doing in the community, but more specifically, our Center for Black Excellence and Culture. And there'll be a link that my podcast team will put in here so that you can find out more about that. But let me just brag on Mr. Phelps just a little bit. After doing all of that work as our county executive, most recently, let me do this and then move back. He's a retired senior vice president of M&I, Marshall and Isley Bank, now called BMO Harris, in Madison and South Central Wisconsin, where he did a number of great things. He also was the senior vice president of the New York City Partnerships and Chamber of Commerce, subsequently named the Partnership of New York City. He did that for 2 years, and that was right after 9/11. Following those attacks, he was part of just really helping to rebuild that part of New York and his partnerships with businesses and CEOs. I just found this out maybe about a year ago, that Rick was the president of the County Executives of America from 95 to 97. So for example, there are 72 counties in Wisconsin, 70-something counties in Wisconsin. And so that means probably close to 72 county executives, administrators. Multiply that by 50, because we have these executives all across the country. He was the president. He presided over all those county executives. And he was also lead spokesperson to the president, Congress, and federal agencies on budget matters on behalf of local and regional leaders. Again, he was the Dane County executive from 88 to 97. Before that, he was a cabinet level state agency director of Wisconsin Public Defender from 83 to 88. You see where I'm going. This man is very adept at leadership skills. You can also understand why I've asked him to be my strategy director for this project, for which I'm raising $40 million roughly to build an incredible 60,000 square foot facility that's going to house the stories and the photographs and the plays and the songs and the artistry and the innovation of Black influence in the state of Wisconsin. And so with all of that, I'm going to now pass the mic to my colleague. I just wanted you to frame and understand where he's coming from, so that when he asks questions, I want you to know I'm already sweating. My armpits are a little wet already, and this man hasn't even started. So with that, I want to introduce a person who's a trusted colleague, and I consider him a really good and close friend, Mr. Rick Phelps. Rick, welcome to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G.
Dr. G, my pleasure. If I slip into calling you Alex on the air, you'll have to forgive me.
No forgiveness needed. No, that's what they call me out here. Just be nice. Rick, just be nice, man.
Well, that's easy. I really have valued our time together over the years, but the last 3.5, we've been on the project together for 3.5 years. It's been a remarkable experience for me, Alex, and I'm Dr. G.
I go by Alex. That's what my mom calls me. That's what she calls me.
At any rate, I want to start by saying how much I appreciate the opportunity. I have loved working with you. I am immensely impressed, I have to say, and you know that. I mean, I've worked on a lot of projects in my life. Many of them have to do with raising money as usual, et cetera. So I feel that I have a good vantage point on leadership and how people do it, and then people do it differently.
Definitely.
And you bring just a tremendous mix of skills to this, Dr. G, that I think are unique. And we had $20,000, if you remember.
Yes.
There's some big, $20,000 and a picture. In fact, I don't think you had a picture at the time, but you had the idea.
I had a good idea.
You totally had a good idea, and I was retired and minding my own business until I heard your idea, and I was in 60 seconds. I mean, this is a powerful thing that you've launched, and now we're at $23 million.
Can you believe? Wait, Rick, say that number again. We're at what?
$23 million plus tax credits, probably equivalent of $28 million. And so, I mean, there's no question that you are the rainmaker for this project, and other people help and do their part. But, I can remember back, I want to start with an example of your thinking process, and then maybe we'll just sort of dig deeper. I'm trying to get more at the personal aspects of this, Alex, rather than what the sort of strategic aspects. And I remember a conversation we were having, and I was remarking on how amazing it is that you're raising money. People are moving from sort of not knowing anything about the center, and all of a sudden, some of the businesses in our community are stepping in at levels that they've never given before.
Right.
And that transition from, "Hi, I'm Alex," to "I'm going to give you all this money for your project," was short. I mean, we did this in a very short period of time.
I think 10 months' time.
Yeah. And before that, you had sort of developed relationships. And at any rate, you mentioned that, I don't raise money through the purse strings, appealing to the purse strings of people. I raise money appealing to the heartstrings of people. And I thought that was a fabulous way to characterize your unique leadership style and how you do it and why it's transformational. It's more than just logic at stake here. So talk some about how you think about that and how this heartstring strategy works.
Sure.
Internally and externally for you.
Okay. Great question, Rick. One of the things that I really have appreciated about this podcast, and this will help me to answer the question, is that the podcast allows me to be Alex G, the person. The man. I'm not a pastor. I'm not a nonprofit leader. I'm a guy who's a son. I'm a son to my mom, a dad to my daughter, husband to my wife, brother, uncle. But in having this space, it's helped me to understand how integrated I am. That when I'm a pastor, I'm not a nonprofit leader. When I'm in my nonprofit space, I'm not a pastor. But at this microphone, I get to be all of those individuals, and I get to bring that voice together, so that when the opportunity to start raising money for the center presented itself, this podcast and the platform that it afforded me to to consolidate my voice, it gave me a different arsenal of talents and tools to bring to the table. So I'm a storyteller. With just my nonprofit hat on, I just talk about statistics. Here's a need, we got to fix it. Here are the issues, we got to address it. But if we're going to raise near $40 million, I couldn't just talk about a single program. I had to cast a vision. Why is Wisconsin considered the worst place in the country for Black people to live? Why has the Race to Equity report talked about the disparity between Blacks and whites, from everything from reading to math at 4th and 8th grade to home ownership, infant mortality rate, mass incarceration? Why is that disparity the greatest in the country? And what's the opportunity to address it? So I'm saying all of that, Rick, to answer this. I knew that the community knew those statistics. And sometimes that became so overwhelming, people would bury their heads in the sand. But if I told a story, if I cast vision, if I spoke to their hearts and helped people to understand that we can make this community better, not by fixing social problems, but by building on the leadership that was already present in a way that we could all benefit, so that it's not just us and them, you and me, but it's us, it's we. That if I could do that, and the best way I could do that would be through story, not through stats, not through quotes, not through fear, but I would have to speak to their hearts and just ask, do you want your children to inherit this problem? Because our parents didn't fix it, because our grandparents didn't fix it, and our great-grandparents sure as hell didn't think about fixing it in this country. But now it's incumbent on us. Do we want to really bequeath this to our children and grandchildren? Let's do something to change the narrative of Madison, Wisconsin, on the state of Wisconsin. And it pricked people's hearts. It gave them a chance to be part of the solution and not just the targeted problem, you people, you systems, the man, privilege, et cetera, et cetera. But by appealing to people's hearts, I got to bypass their minds and their purse strings and speak into their imagination. And I think that by seeing that they could be part of the solution and that a Black influencer was inviting them into that space, it created an opportunity to do something that's different. So I know that that's a long answer, but part of this series is getting those strategies out, because sometimes I think people feel you can do what I've done just because you're Black. You can do it because you've lived in the community. No, I knew these things, and I had to take the information of the data of how we were seen in this country, how we're perceived inside Wisconsin, and tell a story and cast a vision that made people believe that they could have a win. So by going after their hearts, their purses followed. And as a pastor, that's what I do. I go after people's heartstrings. I tell stories, not just for offering, but for change, for involvement, for volunteerism, to build bridges, to be involved in justice issues. I have to speak to people's hearts. But I've never really been afforded the opportunity to use that approach in the social arenas, in the business arenas, in the political arenas. I usually tell those stories at Fountain of Life on Sundays, but I'm a statistician. When it comes to nonprofit work, I'm talking about the needs, help the Black community, help it now. But I knew that if I could tell the story to help people to understand the issues and how they could help, it would allow them to engage in a way that would be sustained. And so that was my approach. I wanted people to be around for the long haul, and I knew that storytelling and vision casting was my best tool.
Well, that was a great answer.
It was a long answer.
No, it was worthy of a long answer.
Thank you.
And really speaking to their imagination, I think is a fabulous way to represent what you do. And sort of related to this, I guess, is a question of when I do talk to you behind your back, by the way. I talk about you, I should say. And one of the things I tell people is that you are one of the most gifted sort of cross-cultural persons I've ever encountered. And
Wow.
and remarkable to me how talented you are in that regard. Really not talent, but perceptive, I think, is a better word. And part of that is you can talk directly to people about race and startling things.
When Rick Phelps says startling people, run for the hills. When Rick says startling, that means I drop some bombs on people.
No, they don't. Yeah, they don't land like bombs. Though they land like you're talking directly to somebody, and it's evident that it comes from a space that is a big heart and a compassionate person. But the message is very direct, and it can be a hard message to listen to or whatever. So I'm interested in how you cultivated that talent, because I think it's really unique. It's not, you don't load it up with a bunch of emotional junk. It's like we're having this direct conversation. And it's not, you don't feel accused or you don't feel defensive about it. You open people's hearts almost right away with it. So how did you just didn't come across that skill, you developed it. So where did that come from?
Oh man, there's a saying that talks about that some things come by nature and some by nurture, and I think this may be a mix of the two. My mom was very cross-cultural, but it wasn't called that. She came of age, in the 50s, but she was a huge Elvis Presley fan, and it wasn't cool for West Side Chicago black teenage girls to be listening to Blue Suede Shoes, but that was her jam. So as a kid, black people clean up on Saturdays. And so we listened to Dusties, which are the oldies or like Motown stuff. But I can clearly remember listening to the Temptations, the Four Tops, and then Helen Reddy, John Denver, The Doors, Steely Dan. So sometimes I'll hear an old Steely Dan song and I'll say, oh, snap, that's my jam. So I think that eclectic love for music just sort of helps to demonstrate the type of household I grew up in, where those were all part of my 70s story. I look like Motown, but there's an emotion that comes up when I hear Carly Simon or Carole King that brings up something a very familiar sentiment that takes me back to my childhood. I was raised in Madison, where I was always one of two black students. And so mom taught me to be adaptive, to listen. She made sure that I knew I was never less than. I was never dumb or inferior. She let me know that I was just as good as anyone else. So she kept driving that in. But because she taught me and my sister Laleta how to be confident, our friends in that first school lived in Maple Bluff. You're from this area, so that's a ritzy area on Lake Mendota, and doctors and the governor's mansion is on that place. But during birthday parties, our friends would send cars for us. And you know what I mean when I say cars, like they're drivers. They owned, pharmacy chains and things. And so we grew up just thinking these are just our friends. Yeah, their house might be, larger, but our bikes were cooler. And their houses may be on the lake, but we had a little, 2-foot pool in the backyard. So we grew up not being jealous of people because they had something that was bigger or larger. That wasn't even something we assigned a value to. But before we knew it, we had skills of being very comfortable with our black friends who lived near us, ate similar to us, our families that looked like us. But I can remember, going to swim at Maple Bluff, beach as a kid. So when I'm in that area, sometimes I think, man, sometimes you might have a second thought about being in that sort of secluded area. It's a village. It has its own fire department. I think its own police department. It's the village of Maple Bluff. But I drive through there and I said, as a 6-year-old kid, I'd hang out at the beach with Dr. Ryder's family. It was just my friends. And so mom helped me to grow up in a world. You often hear terms like being colorblind, but we were really class blind. And because our grades were just as good. I was a good reader. I was starting to get a handle on speaking Spanish or learning Spanish. I was good at math. And so we never felt any sense of inferiority. So in growing up, I could lean into my black friends and my white friends. And so when I got to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, I remember looking in the timetable before you could register online or on your smartphone. You had to really get a timetable. You remember running from building to building.
Indeed.
I remember noticing, wait, the chair of the math department is Nick's dad? Michael Wojcik? That's Nick's. The chair of mechanical engineering is Dr. Rao. That's Asha's dad. So I realized I'd been in gym with and showering with and friends with and running track with kids of department chairs, and I could hang with them intellectually and creatively. And so I found myself really becoming more comfortable with that intellectual community. I went to a high school that had kids of a lot of professors. And so by just being eclectic the way mom had trained me, it taught me to be myself everywhere that I go. And so I feel that what you're alluding to when I say some of the things to folks, I think I'm able to communicate the same way because I've been trained to be the same person everywhere. But I've also realized that there are people who just want you just to be straight shooters. Just what do you think? What do you see? What do you feel? But I think the secret sauce for me is I try to make this clear. I will say the hard things, but I will be part of the solution if you're serious about a resolution. And so I can say hard things and then say, so Rick, how are we going to fix this? What are we going to do? Because you obviously trust me. You have me in this space. So I told you 3 hard things. That's because I want you to do better. So now how can I help you follow through? So I feel the thing that allows me to talk straight is people understanding we just want to know what is so we know how to make the changes. You know, I've been going to medical appointments with my sister who's been recently diagnosed with breast cancer. And when we meet with the oncologist, we don't want someone to tell jokes. We don't want innuendo. What is this? How do you address this? What's the plan of action? And we don't need bedside manner. We don't need someone to be our friends who we can, follow on Facebook. Tell us what this is, how this works, and how we're going to address it. I feel the same thing comes with leadership strategies and cross-cultural strategies. People have had so many instances of what's it called, smoke screens and bait and switch, that if someone's passionate enough to say, I'm only saying what I'm about to say because I care and because I'm a beneficiary of this campus, of this city, of this community. So I'm going to say what I really think and what Black people say when y'all are not in the room. And if you want to act on it, I can help you take the rightful steps. But I want to be the person to at least let you know what time it is. And I feel that level of sincerity and care and partnership comes out. But I don't even realize that that's a thing until friends like you ask, how do you do this? Because my Black friends, my friends who are Black will say, man, there's some stuff that you say that I don't hear any other Black people say. In fact, one time my mother-in-law's from Selma. She said, Alex, them white people gonna kill you if you keep talking like that. She said, them white people gonna come and get you if you don't stop talking like that. And so I just started laughing, because that's not what I think about when I'm sharing my truth. And so that's a great observation that you made. I appreciate you asking me that, because it gives me a chance to tell a bit of the story. But a lot of it is credited to my mom, who saw herself as being a very integrated person who was comfortable in her skin. If you interact with my mom, she is clearly identifying with her Blackness. She came to campus so she can go to school barefoot and wearing dashikis and her hair in a natural. She got down with her Blackness, but she also got down with John Denver. My mom has dementia now, and if you put Steely Dan on or The Doors, she's gonna start patting her feet and moving her shoulders, because that's her jam. And I think she really bequeathed some of that, or I don't know if I want to say bequeathed, because that sounds like something that happens after. But she has really willed that to both me and Leleda, that we have the ability to really move comfortably through the various communities. And I think that's an important gift that not everyone has. And so as I get older, I'm learning to value it more.
Well, I got to tell you, I can vouch for the power of it, in the sense that, we've worked closely together. You've invited me into a space this is truly a center, for those listening who don't know much about the center, created by the Black community, designed, advanced by the Black community. Right. And then, I'm involved as sort of an implementer. I don't decide what's in the center, but I can help with trying to get it created. And so my involvement is close quarters with a very powerful Black instigated, Black designed, Black driven project. And I feel completely comfortable in that setting. And that's because I think you you create a zone where people can feel that way.
Rick,
and
I
help.
Appreciate that.
And that takes a certain level of internal magic that you've got.
I love that.
No, I do admire it. I do admire it. And I'm, my antenna's up, like everybody else's all the time, about life in general. Exactly. Right? So I'm paying attention here. And so I'm impressed, Alex, about how you've created a transformational space for people to work in.
Rick, one of my dreams, and this from when we first started talking around some of these community empowerment or community transformation discussions, is that if we build this right, we're going to build strong cross-cultural relationships in the process.
Yeah.
And we do that. I mean, me and Jackie and you and Lynn have had a chance to go out socially just to talk and have a meal and break pasta together, or have discussions, or check up on each other's families when there are health issues. So it's not just work related, but there are things that we text and check in on. You know about the situation with my mom and my sister. I knew about the situation with your 2 granddaughters. And so we communicate about those things. And so I love the fact that we're modeling. We're not patting ourselves on the back, but I want people to understand this. Building cross-cultural relationships and strengthening them is not just about talking about it and reading about it. It's about really getting into each other's lives. And I think too many people have objectified race relations by just reducing it to either a hashtag or a discussion. But working together helps you to bond together. We've learned this from athletics. We've learned this from military. We've learned this from work. People, when they have a common goal and they have a common enemy, they are less likely to become each other's enemies. So in this process, I get a chance to witness someone who used to budget money for the nonprofit world following my leadership. So, I mean, I remember when, you sign certain things like, the Children Come First work and, just things that allow money to come to the grassroots community to help children with severe emotional disturbances and other kinds of things. You've always been a youth advocate. So I've appreciated that. But to have you then affirming my leadership and following my leadership while I'm being authentically myself, authentically cross-cultural, but unapologetically Black, there are a lot of Black leaders who feel that if we bring all of us to the table, white people will step away or non-Black people will step away. And I had to risk being authentic in this process because the lack of space for authenticity for Black folks is what has caused the Black brain drain in Wisconsin. The lack of that kind of space is what makes Black people say, I can't be here. I'd rather deal with the KKK in Mississippi than the niceness of silent white progressive folks or folks who call themselves progressive, who smile in your face, but they don't really help to promote you. They don't affirm you. They don't open doors for you. And so I have really grown by being in a space where I get to be authentically myself and I get to lead a cross-cultural team because younger Black leaders are telling me we didn't know that non-Black people would follow Black leadership. And so I think we're all modeling something together that people long to see, but it's still a rarity.
Oh, there's no question. And, we've talked about this, probably 50 years I've been involved with the community. This was really, to see the broader community get in behind Black leadership and say, you lead, we're with you, and then actually do stuff that's helpful. Right. Is wonderful. It's a new chapter in many ways of our civic life here, and it bodes well for what the environment the center is going to operate in.
Definitely, and it gives me a sense of hope too, Rick. And I keep stressing to folks, particularly I'm almost 59 and a half. I'm going to be 60 this year, and I think I surprise people when I say, there are cold snaps in January and February where I need to be someplace warm. But I feel momentum happening in Madison. I see the convergence of Black and brown leaders, and combined campaigns of over $100 million. Any city in America would vie for the Black and brown talent that's moving and shaking and raising money in this community and celebrating each other's success the way we are. I want to be around to see that. So there are things that's happening with the business communities and the philanthropic community's response to Black and brown leadership that is really encouraging. And I had hoped to see this. I wasn't sure that I would see this in my lifetime, but I'm seeing things that are making me see myself here long term, even though I've been here 50 years, but seeing myself here longer. But I think when the business community and the broader community understands that we want to be part of the solution, and we're not trying to bash Madison like an exit interview as we're walking out the door, that we really want to be a part of the solution, I think that makes people want to ante up as well, that what I'm giving are not parting shots. It's really an invitation to get to the dance floor. Let's dance together. Let's really make this work. And it feels very empowering to be in this space at this time. Why support Black Like Me podcast? There are very few places where Black activists and innovators can listen to and hear someone so aptly and culturally appropriately voice their concerns and dreams and aspirations and fears and illnesses and cultural commonalities. Equally, There are so few places where concerned non-Black thinkers and feelers, readers and watchers, lovers of culture, stalwarts of racial justice and harmony can go to learn, lean in, and to be a quiet fly on the wall in Black spaces and experience deep personal transformation through listening to honest Black people's truth. Black Like Me podcast is that for so many people in this nation and around the world. Now, while your financial support beginning at as little as $2 a month will get you access to pre-released information, updates, conversations, insights, and exclusive events, your support also affords us the opportunity to expand the quality and reach of our excellent programming in thoughtful and authentic ways to more and more people. And more importantly, white people need to stop trying to get free shit from Black people. All right, seriously, your financial support is a vote of confidence, and it's an enabler of vision and innovation. So why not click that link today and join the movement? I want to thank you in advance for your support and your partnership.
And the leadership that you're talking about, Alex, the divisiveness that was encouraged sometimes early on,
Yes, sir.
pitting one project against the other, it never came from the leaders of the projects. I mean, I don't remember a single episode where you and also other leaders of different projects, primarily on the South Side,
Right.
were making public comments that in
Not
any
at all.
way divided the community. It was very impressive. I mean, when money's on the line, it can cause ugly behavior. And people did not, the leadership that you're referring to did not fall victim to that. And that takes discipline and it takes integrity. And I was impressed with it.
Thank you for that. And that's how a lot of us were raised, to not be dog eat dog. One of the things that many of us are taught is, or you might disagree with people, but you better not go out here in the public fighting with other Black people in front of a whole audience of white people. Like that's probably one of the greatest demonstrations of disrespect. And so I was just speaking with a funder about this issue yesterday, and I said, when my colleague who's building a project, the hub nearby, he called me and said, I'm having a groundbreaking. He wrote me and said, I need you to be there. And then he wanted to make sure I was in a photo op with him in doing this. And so of course I was, because we're fraternity brothers, we're friends, we socialize. But we've never had a terse moment. We've even written a grant together, but I have had funders say, should I fund you or their project? And my response was all the above. They named a few others as well. And so to your point, we've never had like a diss fest online or in the in the print media or on television, because we're celebrating each other. I get a text message saying, hey man, I just saw you got $5 million from the governor, or I just saw you got money from the Packers. The Green Bay Packers invested $250,000 in Dane County, probably the largest gift they've ever contributed, and we matched it. It turned it into a $500,000 contribution because of them. But he wrote me and said, hey man, congratulations on that grant. But he got some money from Mackenzie Scott. So I wrote him and said, man, that is fantastic. Keep up the good work. And so I think we understand that without each other's successful projects, our own is limited. So we understand the value of collaboration. We understand the value of it all happening at the same time. 100 years ago when the Harlem Renaissance happened, it wasn't just a time for the poets, but it was the artists, and it was the dancers, and it was the actors, and it was the actresses. But then it was also Black people managing the Cotton Club and other kinds of places. So it wasn't just a proliferation of just one genre of arts. It was multifaceted, but they all grew together. And we understand that the statement that will be made, the impact that will be experienced by the success of each of our projects collaboratively, aggregately, is something that will change the face of Madison for everyone. And so we vouch for each other's programs and projects because we need it to happen. But that's an area of leadership that was almost thwarted, because not one, but on several occasions, funders have pitted us against each other by saying, should we give money to you or them. So I'm glad that integrity and a sense of community has prevailed, so that we continue to lean together. Now, I want to get my project done first. I'm not going to think I'm all that altruistic. I want to get mine done first. But I need Karen's project at Central Spino. I need Ruben's project through the Urban League, the hub. I need those things to happen. I need, one city to do well. I need what my colleagues are doing to really work.
Absolutely. Well, having been a professional politician, there are lessons in that could be learned in the political process somehow.
Do say.
We've moved to the opposite end of that spectrum in political
really
life,
have.
unfortunately. So now I don't know if this question will make any sense. I'm fishing for something, but because you're working in a world where you're basically building a center without an organization. I mean, you're creating the organization and the center all at the same time. So we have a very opportunistic and agile crew of people involved, and your leadership has allowed for that.
Right.
But my experience at least is, and I don't know if this applies to you, but when I'm working on something that has never been done, nobody thought of this before, which is a wonderful space to work in. I love that creative space. And, that was the most, well, I won't go into my career in it, but it was a wonderful feeling. The ambiguity, the uncertainty, the anything can happen, all of that. But I had certain things I learned to trust that are a little, almost, this might sound a little mystical, but a process of change, there's always a pivot or many pivots, but it can be one comment and sentence somebody says,
yes.
or it could be a big thing. Aha moments where you never thought of it and you realize it, or you almost can see the tunnel that you're going to go through. You can almost see what's going to happen. It's almost a visual path to this new place. Are there any of those kind of, in Alex's quiet moments, part of you that you've learned to rely on over the years when you say, that's a clarion ring, this is the right path, this is the right thing to do?
Rick, I think that's probably one of the coolest questions I've been asked over the course of my podcast. One of the coolest questions I've had in looking over the past 7 seasons, because this is where I get to bring the spiritual part of my life into my work. Yeah, there was a time when I was 16. This was like 1979. I was a junior in high school, and I was sitting with friends, and we were all involved in like our little living room church. And we're just trying to think, will we ever have a real building? Will we ever grow out of this space? We're having, we're 16-year-olds. Like, we should have been doing all kinds of crazy things, but we were thinking about that. I remember saying out loud to them, you guys, I just got this aha. Like you said, this pivotal moment, this epiphany. I said, we won't always be in this house, but I get this strong sense we're going to be on a hill. And I thought I was speaking metaphorically, that we'd be on a hill. And I get the sense, what I'm hearing inside is that the whole city is going to take note of it, that something's going to happen on that hill that's going to make people shake their heads. Now, that was 44 years ago. But at a period of time when I thought about selling this property that we're currently on, we're on 6.2 acres where the center is going to be built. When there's an opportunity to sell it or consider selling it, there are people who said to me, hey, one time you told us this vision about being on a hill. If you're moving to that other property, that's flat. That's not a hill. You can't do that. What are you trying to do? I look back and I think about the fact that this is being built on a hill where 140,000 cars pass it. That's more than half of Madison's. That's probably, 60-70% of Madison's population. They pass it. It's on the major thoroughfare to the university. That was an aha for me that I held on, and I still hold on to it for like 40 years. I'm only 59, so for most of my life, I believed that something significant was going to happen in the community, and I was going to lead it. My mom and sister were both social workers. My sister worked for the county, as you know, as a county social worker. My mom worked more with nonprofits. And they just talked about the struggle of the growing black community and not having the support of black social service providers. And I got this aha, what if we did that? So I said to my friends that I had attended UW with, and these are black folks from all over the Midwest, and I said, don't leave Madison. I want to challenge you guys. Will some of you stay so we can create a young black middle class that will not only drive BMWs, but we will do good in the community? And the idea that they could focus on being prosperous without guilt, but be committed to community service, to hold the two in tension, was appealing to them. And about a dozen of them agreed to stay. They helped me establish this church. They helped me build Nehemiah. They told me that I was a community leader. They validated my leadership when no one wanted to know what I said, what I thought. There were no publishing companies wanting to publish my books, my poems. There were no news stations wanting to tell my stories. There were none allowing me to write my story. But the handful of people that I invited to stay in Madison spoke to me and said, you're a leader and we're going to follow you. So people think I'm a leader now because I can get a call into the governor. I can call our congressman and get him to pick up or return my phone call. My leadership began when 22, 23-year-old folks said, we believe you, we believe in you and in your vision, and we've got you. Those are the people who helped me believe that I could do anything. And when they said, we affirm your leadership, that was an aha, that I could run and I would actually have a cadre of people with me. These folks have gone on to become the city's poet laureate, citywide artist activist, first black CEO of a major property management company. One young lady wrote the state's 150th birthday or anniversary song. These folks just began to influence the community, but it happened with ahas that were, and I love that you said the word mystical because that's not used a lot in our culture. But what has really set me apart, I believe, in my leadership is that I've learned to be confident in those pivotal aha moments. That is, I have never sat down and strategized and said, this is what I want to run. This is what I want to lead, and not have it work. But it's been those pivotal ahas that I have followed, that have materialized, between the podcast and Nehemiah and the church and consultants that I have at the center. I have 50 people whose checks I sign, they're direct deposits, so they don't see them. But if they got real checks, they would see my name on it. And I don't always think of that, but wow, because of that aha in 79, and I followed it. I stayed in Madison because of it. I turned down the job I wanted with Xerox, which was in Milwaukee, to take a job as a retail store management trainee, which I hated, because it was in Madison, so I could be close to the work. And so I look back on my career and I realized, I've accomplished a lot in my 40s and 50s, but the aha came in my teens. And they helped me to make decisions about finishing high school, going to college, staying out of trouble. And so the reason why I said that's one of my favorite questions is people see leaders and think that we just sort of get up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make this shit work. I'm going to make this happen. But I've been following those nudges, those impulses, those ahas, and one leads you to the next. You don't know where it's going, but it's almost like transferring planes. Like one will get you to O'Hare, but then if you want to get to the West Coast, you've got to go to another terminal and do this. I feel like each aha brought me to a broader aha or greater clarity or the witness of the fruitfulness of that aha. But I've learned that to trust that so much that now my team follows it with me. And to me, that's the magic sauce. The fact that I'm sitting here with a former county executive, former president of the Association of County Executives, because of a vision, $20,000 and a vision and an idea, I'm now beginning to realize the value of that aha. And so my great work now is not only how do I put together strategies so that I can help to get at the purses of wealthy people. It is how do I nurture and how do I protect the sensitivity of the inner landscape of my heart, of my soul, of my life, so that I continue to hear those ahas. Because in moments of busyness, of self promotion, in being less than grateful, being competitive, those antennae weaken. And you can't hear those things that drive you. And so I'm humbled to think that I'm hearing things today that I might not be able to fulfill in the next 40 years, but I'm training staff that can. That really blows me away. So then my struggle as a leader, or my goal as a leader, is to not read better management books or practice better management strategies, but it's how do I take care of that inner landscape so that I hear those pivotal ahas, those epiphany-filled moments. That's the real challenge. And what I need to do that looks different than just other leaders. Sometimes it's stepping away, and as an extrovert, that's really difficult. But it's in my rest in the summer. It's in things that I'm doing to build space and capacity in my heart to hear more of those things. But that's the real challenge, because if I can hear it, I'm now confident that it can happen. And that's been something very special in my leadership. And I don't think that that's ever come up. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that question and allow me to speak into the non-sectarian, non-religious aspect of mysticism and how there are those who do have those experiences. I think sometimes we're just called visionaries, but no one really asks, so where does that visionariness begin? What's its nexus? What's its impetus? And it is a nudge, it's a thought, it's a feeling, it's an aha. I'll give one more example of this. When the pandemic first hit and we shut down everything, I really thought Nehemiah was going to go under, because I wasn't sure how it was, how the Wall Street was closed. They'd shut down March Madness. That scared the crap out of me. But then when Wall Street was closed, I thought, okay, this is the end of the world. This is like Armageddon. What's going on? I sat in on the Zoom with some friends from all over the world, but it was led by a Korean American thought leader out of Southern California. And as people were talking about what was going on, they basically said stuff is just going to be hitting the fan for like the next 18 months, 2 years. But after about that time, things are going to come back to normalcy a little bit. It'll be different, but it won't be like what it is right now, because we weren't working. People were trying to get their internets to work. Zoom was just becoming the thing for people. They said, but we've got to learn to pivot. And it's like it reverberated. And it's interesting that you use that word. I heard like pivot. I remember my operation was in my basement. I called my executive vice president and said, stop chasing pandemic money. Start telling donors what we do. Start talking about our reentry programs, our history class. Start talking about what we do. When we did that, we moved our U.S. Black History course, which had like 250 people. When we did it for the previous 6 years, we put it online, 1,700 people registered. We started putting together like a video production. I hired Jeremy, who's my engineer here, on the show to put that together. And we started putting this video experience so that our folks could still connect. And we created an app so people could give virtually. But I heard in that call, we must pivot. Don't let today frighten you. Think about where you need to be 2 years from now. So I started strategizing for that. And both organizations, our church and Nehemiah, are healthier in terms of communication, vision, staff, budget, savings in the bank than we were 5 years ago. That's completely crazy. But that huge aha to pivot and not lean into my fears, but where do we need to be in 2 years and begin to work towards that? I think that's the latest example of when I got this aha that I heard through a conversation that completely changed the trajectory. And then in the middle of that, Rick, and you didn't ask me because of this, but in the middle of seeing the positive movement of those organizations, but in the middle of witnessing that pivot happening inside Nehemiah and the church, I started finding some exciting things. You called me up and said, this is not the most opportune moment, Alex. I know politicians are kind of frightened about where things are going. I think it's time to dust off the discussions about the center, because we have been talking about the center. We were making some shifts. The pandemic hit. Not only did I assume that Nehemiah was going under, I just assumed that the center was never to be spoken of again. I was done with that. I was trying to make sure that my church and my nonprofit, continued to exist post-pandemic, which we thought might be 2 months. You brought up the subject that I think it's time to dust it off again. That was another aha, because I was thinking, okay, Rick is the cautious one in the group. If anyone is going to suspect that the sky is falling on my team, it's going to be Rick, because he's like, I don't necessarily see it, but in situations like this, the sky's been known to fall, so we need to be careful. The fact that you said we need to put this back on the table was one of those aha moments. So I said, okay, and we pulled the band back together and brought in the band, and here we are $23 million later. But it was one of those pivotal moments where my head didn't say that, my bank account didn't say that, nothing about that made sense. But something about your suggesting that we dust it off at such an inopportune moment felt so unexpected that it made me say, why the hell not? What I got to lose? If he thinks it's a good idea, maybe the politicians are thinking differently, maybe the sky is falling, and it was, let's do it. I shudder to think where we would be. Hey, you not said that, had I not heard that, had I not acted on that. But because I was already acting on a previous pivot, I thought, why not pivot in this area too? So looking back 3 years later, thinking about what's happened across these various organizations because of that sort of mystical nudge, that is my secret sauce. And as a leader who happens to be Black, no one ever asks me that publicly. They want to know about, tell us about your, how you're on welfare, how your mom came back to school and didn't go to high school. Tell us your story about, rags to popularity. But no one really asks in public media, how do you hear this? Like, what are your nudges? And for me, I could lose money because I have. I can lose inner circle folks because I have. I can lose facilities. But if you give me a nudge, I will share it until somebody says, that's interesting. Let's hoist that up the flagpole to see who salutes. So let's throw that, pasta against the wall to see if it sticks. If I can have vision, I can lead in the creation of something new. So that's really my secret sauce, what you just asked.
That's great to hear, Alex. Yeah.
That's probably a great note to end on, because I'm just thinking, wow. I mean, I have nothing left to give. Those are such great questions, Rick, that even as I go about my evening, I'm going to continue to ponder that. But I will ask you, do you have any last pressing questions for me before we wrap this up?
No, just an off the record observation. Companion with that, you made a comment about you believed it would happen.
Yes.
In one of your sentences. I think that's a matching a partner to this intuitive thing we're talking about, and that is the belief that, wow, I can change reality. I mean, I'm not just raising this idea to make a point.
Right.
No, I'm going to build a center.
Yes.
And I can do that. I meaning you in this case, right? And that's a psychological threshold that social activists don't move through enough. And I get impatient with them. Stop making points, win fights. Right? And it's like, but you gotta, it's almost again a mystical thing where all of a sudden you believe, holy cow, I'm gonna win this.
That's powerful.
And then
Rick.
you expect to win every fight thereafter.
Right.
So once you experience it, and this idea manifests, you go, every time you come up to bat on something, you're thinking, this is going to happen.
Yes.
I'm not going to talk about it. It's going to happen.
One of the beautiful things about visionary leadership, as I've come to understand it in its operation in my life, is it's never about me. That it should never make people want to bow down to me because, hey, you got this vision, you got this idea. Right. It creates space for others to come into their own as well. True vision ought to create space for people to live into their dreams as well. So even though I was very excited about building this cultural center, you were one of the first people to say, this could be a national model. And so it's got to look like it. So again, I believe that the center could work, but I did not think about it in terms of a national platform or national notoriety or something that could tell the story of all of Wisconsin. But because Vision allowed me to open the door for others to say, and this is what I dream, or this is what I see concerning this dream. Again, you hadn't shaped it. You hadn't been the people speaking, part of the team speaking into it. I'm talking like the Black listening groups. But as you listen to what we were saying, you said to me, this needs to be a national space, on par with some of the other national similar artistic or museum centered spaces, but it's just rooted in Wisconsin. And so the beauty of visionary leadership is that just because it sees what hasn't existed doesn't mean that it sees everything. But when you put it out there, others can say, and let's become a national model. And that's what we're focusing on now. That's really where we are. This series is it's actually doing more than what I wanted it to do. I wanted it to inspire other people, but it's inspiring me because much of what my guest hosts are asking are things that I don't fully live into because some things I don't know until I say it. That's one thing about being intuitive. When I say it, I think, oh, that put language to what I was feeling. And so you allowed me to really articulate some things today that I need to remember about my leadership, particularly that mystical part, the dreaming part, the part about being cross-cultural and non-apologetic but effective. Those are things that I'm going to process, and a lot of leaders of color, when they listen to this, are going to lean into, and a lot of our non-Black, a lot of our white allies are going to listen to this and realize, some of my friends of color are visionaries, and I need to stop trying to change their language and their approach and help them lean into it. So this has been really powerful. Listen, folks, I know you're going to need to share this and repost this and help others who need to hear it, help them to hear it and experience it. This has been encouraging and life-giving and such a wonderful exercise. So my special guest host has been the Honorable Rick Phelps, who has done many things, but he came out of retirement to really help strengthen my leadership and to help me lead this effort to establish this Center for Black Excellence in Culture. And so this has just been a wonderful, wonderful experience. Listen, folks, I want you to listen to this a couple of times over again and then think about how you can act differently, partner differently, things that you can do to help vision really happen. This is important. And when we keep certain people from leadership tables and from boardrooms and key meeting spaces, we miss a lot of this visionary leadership. And I'm not saying it's just a Black or brown thing, because visionary leaders are everywhere. But because Black and brown people have been shut out of a lot of leadership spaces, we're losing a lot of potential for vision. So think about this, lean into this. And again, as I mentioned, share it out. You can help us to continue to do this work by going and supporting us on Patreon. You can become one of our supporters to just say, we like what you're doing and what you're saying. We think that it is meaningful. And your podcast is not merely entertainment, but it's giving us some things to think about that can change our communities as well. We've got the appropriate links in the notes section. Do something, act on something, and become a part of this change on a continual basis. I appreciate your support. I appreciate this space. I appreciate our listeners and all of the people who make this a great success. In front of the mic, behind the mic, and those of you who listen to what we're doing on the mic. Have a great day and become a part of the change you really want to see. Take care.
Black like me. Black like me.
Wow, I really enjoyed today's conversation, and I know that you did too. With each episode, I challenge my listeners to do a number of things: to lean in, to learn, to reflect, to share, to donate, but more importantly, to act on what has inspired you in today's episode. The benefit of being around for 8 seasons is that people constantly stop me and tell me how much they love the show, and they even give me ideas and suggestions about Black icebreakers. But I couldn't have pulled this off alone. So let me take a moment so that I can acknowledge and thank my crew. Engineers and producers Jeremy and Eli. Also a member of my creative team is Jakesha. The music was produced by Corey Saffold, and Marcus Fleming is on vocals. And of course, you, our Patreon supporters, and all of our listeners, thank you. To everyone who listens to this podcast and you decide to share it with someone who needs it, to everyone who listens and then reposts it on your own social media accounts, to everyone who hears something that moves them to act differently, act better, and to everyone who leans in to understand Black life more honestly, thank you.
Black like me.